Okay, so welcome back to Domain 3, PCSAE, and we're going to now, sort of within this domain, we're now looking at automations and integration and related concepts. That's the heading of the section, and this is really, as it suggests, it's around the configuration and understanding of automations and how the integrations and everything work together in order to give Cortex its strength, basically. As far as I'm aware, there is no coding aspect to the exam. However, if you want to take the exam, I would very much suggest that you have at least a good, I would say, a good working knowledge of Python or JavaScript. I think majority of the scripts now, majority of the automations are written in Python. But my experience is, certainly with people that are programmers, of which I am not, my experience is that once you've learnt one language, it's quite easy to port it across to another language. So one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to go to the automations to have a look and see what's there. Okay, so this is the automations page. You got the library there, which you can hide or show, and then you've got your automation to one side. So if we click into that, you can see this is the automation. So when we're using a Ceph parser, this is what we're going to be using. Okay, so if you ever have an issue with an automation, and I think I'm repeating myself, but I'll go back over it again. So if you have an issue with an automation, such as the virus total one I had, so the automation and the integration wanted me to have the private API key. So when I looked in here, let's see if I can virus total virus, no. So when I looked into it, there was within the integration itself, or within the playbook, it was looking for the API. So if I go for virus, there you go, find the enrichment virus total private API. See, even I screw it up. Say even I, Jesus. So there, you can see here that it's looking for the virus total private API. And so every time that I had this playbook being called, it was failing because it had failed this check. So where it says get modules brand, where modules.brand equals virus total private API, you can then make a copy of this and edit that to look for the integration, the one that you've got. Okay. So to go through what the exam's actually wanting you to know, so you've got to outline the different types of automation. Okay, so you have, I've got to stop saying okay after everything I say. It's getting really annoying. It's getting on my nerves. So you've got single purpose automations, which as a general rule manipulate data in system or wrap sort of multiple integrations that are not, it's not a complete product. It's basically used to enrich something, or it's used to bring two things together or something like that. You have automation scripts, which perform specific actions, such as add evidence. This performs a specific action, and that's and comprises commands associated with an integration object. Scripts are they're used as part of tasks used in playbooks and commands in the war room. It's important to know that all scripts can access all XOR APIs. So this is where we come now to them wanting you to understand the role-based access controls and how you can control people's access to potentially dangerous scripts. So you can stop people from doing things that they don't understand and would harm the situation. Okay. You can also password protect the scripts as well. Okay, so then we move on to differentiating between inputs and outputs. So the inputs, as we said before, might come from the incident itself, such as the role of whom to assign the incident, or from an input provided by an integration, or say, for example, when Active Directory integration is used in the playbook task to extract users' credentials, let's say. The playbook itself creates objects whose entries will serve the tasks inside the playbook. Okay, so if we look at playbooks, we can see, get there in the end. Okay, so from the playbook there, we have inputs, and this goes through all the inputs that the playbook is going to. So these will be the inputs it takes from the incident that's created, or a job, or something like that. And then the outputs, this is what then comes afterwards, and this is what you can then act on, or you can use then to pass into another playbook. So you've got the file and the file's object, the indicator, the SHA-1, the SHA-256, and the malicious file.malicious vendor. So as that says there, it's just there. Malicious file is the vendor that made the decision. So if you had virus total, then that would be virus total. If you had wildfire, then that would be wildfire. Okay, so that's your inputs and outputs basically. That literally is kind of, they make sense. They're inputs and outputs, and then inputs that come from an incident go through a process, and then they become, you get outputs, and then you can take those outputs and push them into another incident, or they appear in the war room. So when we are looking at changing scripts, when we are looking at editing scripts or building our own scripts, our own automations, part of the reason I say you've got to have a good working knowledge is because there's a lot already built into XOR in order to make that easier for you to do. And in order for you to be able to write stuff, if you're not like a whiz coder or something like that, you've got the script helper here. And the script helper basically covers all the commands, the API. So there you go. So add a child investigation. So the argument's there, and then the description of what that's going to do. So you can add that into your script. You can, yep, there we go. So if active users D2 get active content from users, so showing only scripts related to Cortex XOR server. So if you need help with it and you're editing something, and then if you've got how to return an error to the war room, and there you've literally got the line of code. If you are creating, so let's create a new automation. Have I spelled that right? Yes, I have. Don't usually. Okay, so this is our test automation. Okay, so in the script settings here, we have language type and the version that we're going to use, a description. So okay, it's enabled, and you've got arguments, and then your argument there would be the argument you need, and whether it's going to be mandatory, whether it's default, whether it's case sensitive. But the thing I really wanted to show you was because that's fairly easy. And then the Docker image name is there. So this is the Docker image that you're creating, and that's going to be the container. Okay, so if we spin that script helper, there. So now, when we're editing our own script, what we can do now is we can copy this across. So if we decide that this is what we want to add a child investigation, we can copy it to the script, and there it's already in there for us. So as long as this is what I mean about if you've got a working knowledge, as long as you've got a working knowledge of how you need things to be done, and how things need to go together, you can use the script helper to add functionality, and lines of code to your script. Okay, so I don't care. So now, as we said, we need to go back over the RBAC stuff, the role-based access controls. So applying the permissions is basically because you want to have a separation of people that can do things. Because this whole idea that so let's looking at XOR, the whole idea behind it is that the guesswork's taken out, right? So you have an incident, you have something's happened, and from the moment that starts, the idea is to bring all the people in who are the best at dealing with those things and give them the permissions they need and the information they need to deal with the incident, to respond to it as quickly as possible and with the most accuracy as possible. So within that, you then have the ability to control who can make changes to scripts, who can make changes to things that are going to be sensitive, because what you want to do is you want to make sure that is only being done by the person who knows what they're doing. Excuse me, for some reason I can't breathe, which isn't ideal, if I'm being honest. Okay, so to then add that, to add the permissions to it, we need to go to the settings, users and roles, integration permissions. And here you'll see all of the permissions, all of the integrations that are in XOR at the minute and enabled. Okay, so let's say we wanted to. Okay, so Polyswarm, which actually I've been speaking to them again, doesn't actually work at the minute because the uptake on the integration was quite low, so it kind of got pushed back along their development line. Although that said, I've used their online API. I've used like the HTML5 stuff, and it is very good. So it'd be a shame. Maybe I'll do a project at some point to try and fix it. But yeah, you never know. Eh? So we've got all commands, and then we can edit this. Okay. So all instances add the roles for all commands. So we'd have an administrator can add for all instances, can add all commands. Yeah. Okay. So then if we move down, what we want to do then is if we then say that URL scan, an analyst can do that. File rescan makes sense, analyst. Get file, analyst. You get the idea. I'm not going to go through them all. You get the idea. And this simply means that within these two instances, which is the two instances there, you've got Polyswarm Epoch, which is one instance, and Polyswarm Lima. So this would be specifically for those two instances. So if I've got analyst here, basically the administrator can do everything on Polyswarm Epoch, and on there I've restricted it to the analyst for doing the Lima stuff. Okay, so that then means when I save that, yes I am, and I'm happy with that. What I now have is I've made it so that the analyst can't use the URL command, can't use the IP command, can't use the file command, but they can do a URL scan, a file rescan, and a get file. So in that respect, what you're doing then is you're segmenting further the abilities of the analyst and the administrators and all other roles that are defined within XOR to what people can and can't do based I guess you would base that on the conversation with your customer, because I would imagine that for things such as editing integrations and stuff like that, you would want only your engineers to do that, and analysts wouldn't be able to do that. And it also determines what they can actually see. So if we try and start remembering that the idea behind XOR is to take the guesswork of the initial analysis, and all the noise, and then it potentially going round different departments before it gets to where it needs to be, within the existing infrastructure within a company, then you'll start to sort of understand how it works. Because up until that point, you do tend to fight against it a little bit, because it's like, well, I don't understand why it's doing that. I don't understand why it's doing that. Or maybe that's just me, because I'm not. This is my first foray into this at this kind of depth. Okay, so we've done the role-based access controls, and we'll go back over that again at some point. So as we move further on, start talking about differentiating between automation objects. So we start thinking of the XOR CLI like an operating system. If you start thinking about it that way, it makes life a lot easier. It's built into the product and connects to every tool that you need. So it has full connectivity. You can run everything from the CLI. You can run everything from here for running automations and so on and so forth. So you're going to need to familiarize yourself with the different types of commands. So basically, a / that's acting upon XOR itself. So you can clear playground, for instance, and then that clears that. And then you have these commands. You can see the difference here. So if we go back to, so you've got commands. So they're system commands that you can run, and that started with a / and it's got that at the top to help you. And then you have scripts, which have got a capital at the start. These are scripts that you run from here. And if we go further down, you'll see that you get to lowercase first characters, and they're the commands. So you can add to a list, get indicators. Let's try that actually. Alien Vault, get indicators. Indicator type. So that's then just gone off to Alien Vault, and it's got indicators, IP indicators. And of course, it's not going to show everything here because there's too much of it. So it literally tells you it's showing 54% of the content, and then you can view the full artifact in a new tab. Just give it a second because my XOR box is woefully underpowered. And then this is all the indicators that it got. Okay, and so from here you can export that to CSV. You can use it, mark it as evidence. You can download it as a file. It is you can do literally what you want with it. Okay, so those are the important things to remember when it comes to that. So on from there, we start looking at being able to apply the appropriate automation commands. So you have integrations that contain automation scripts and commands. We can see these if we go to settings. When you look at that integration there, so the integration there is no instance for it. So although it's there, it's not actually current, whereas this one is. So as long as I don't screw this up again, we should be able to duo authenticate. Thank you very much. And yes, confidence is restored. So there's another thing that's very interesting here, is that the top and bottom of it is when you download and install an integration, although its commands are there, then they don't appear down here because there's no instance to act upon. So you have to create the instance to get the commands. Okay, so as we said before, you differentiate between them by looking at the first letter. Basically, a script's first letter is always in uppercase, whereas a command is always in lowercase. And then according to the type of letter you search for, you will see scripts and commands. So if we test that out, active, and then there's commands underneath. There's nothing to against active, but there's commands underneath, and you can see active uses D2 scripts at the top. Okay, so from there we get into the wonderful world of creating your own integrations and stuff like that. So within the realm of being an XOR, so the automation engineer kind of dictates that as you go into employment, or as you start offering the service, you're going to end up in a situation where you will be the one that is creating integrations, or at the very least engineering integrations to suit the customer's actual needs. Out of the box, these things are very, very good, I have to admit. And there are, for a majority of people, there are many integrations that work exactly how they're going to need them to do. I mean, and I would venture the opinion that Active Directory, to be fair, majority of the stuff here, it's going to work how you want it to. So, do we have an instance of Active Directory? We don't. So there is two here. There's the authentication, and that is what. So if you configure an instance for that, you'll authenticate to Active Directory, and that authenticates XOR to Active Directory. And then you've got the query v2, and that's the one that, when you look, there's a lot more commands involved in that, because you'll find that's within the playbooks and the scripts to do the further enrichment upon Active Directory users within an environment in response to an incident. So you'll find that a lot more. But what you will also find as well is that you sometimes will be called upon, and depending on the customer, sometimes you'll be called upon to create integrations from scratch. Because, believe me, that is how it's going to be sold. It's going to be sold as this well, to be honest, it's going to be sold exactly as it is. It's a Swiss Army knife. It is designed specifically to work really, really well, as Demisto did. I mean, Demisto was the right one for Palo to go with. It's designed to work really, really well, but its main selling feature is the fact that you're not tied down to a specific set of commands, a specific set of integrations, specific API calls, or anything like that. You can build this how you need it to be, and therefore, as well, even as an analyst, it is probably advisable to look at the engineering side of things, because if you were to move customers, or you were to move jobs or anything like that, contracts, whatever, you may find that as this becomes more and more adopted and it becomes more and more prevalent, you may also find that no two implementations are the same. So at which point you're going to have to start to consider the engineering side of it, because you're going to have to look through what it's doing in order to work out how to properly leverage it. So in integrations, we have here, we can search for, so if we just bin that again, we can show all the enabled ones. So enabled, remember again, is it's installed and there's a instance of it that is running. We can go for disabled. These are disabled because the API doesn't work, and that's disabled because I disabled it. I have absolutely no idea. It does explain something though. Or all type custom. So if you create a custom integration, and you can see I've started with the Yoda Speak, which I'll put the link to, I think, down below. That's an awesome bit of documentation from XOR, from Cortex, that goes through building an integration from scratch. So if you create your own custom integrations, this is where they'll be. And then system integrations is integrations that are in here. And from what I can see, never actually clicked on that before, but from what I can see, probably the same as all. Category, you can filter by categories, you can filter by authentication. Case management, where it integrates with Jira and ServiceNow. Database, MySQL, SQL Server. You can see how, I mean, they're both deprecated, so I could probably do with uninstalling them, frankly. So that's the integrations page. Now, the actual knowledge required for the exam is more that you can create your own integrations and the process by which you would do it. As far as I'm aware, there is no coding element to the exam, as I said before, and creating integrations is very code intense because you're writing the code. Although, of course, you have to remember, as mentioned in the previous section, the IDE does have a comprehensive script helper to guide you through the process. In addition to this, there's a plugin for PyCharm. There's an XOR plugin for PyCharm that allows you to, which connects to your XOR instance, and then allows you to write your code within PyCharm and run it against Demisto mock code, I believe they call it, where you can develop your code outside of XOR for whatever reason, if you're more comfortable using PyCharm, if that's what you've used before. I know it's a very popular IDE, so you can develop your code outside of XOR, and that will automatically, it will put it on there. You can upload it to XOR from there. I believe you can upload it to the marketplace as well. I will be doing a video on creating integrations, but as for the PCSAE, I don't think it really needs to go that far. However, from this particular aspect, let's talk about how we do it and the way to create it. Just quickly, so if you have an integration you've already downloaded from somewhere, you can upload it using the wonderfully titled upload integration, and then you've got a version history for all integrations. But if you want to create our own, we click on the bring your own integration, and again there's a lot of documentation here that if you read through, it makes a lot of sense. If you already know about coding, it makes even more sense. You can create, drag your own logo, bring that in here. You've got all the options here that you'd have. So name, description makes perfect sense. Utilities, so you would cross that off, and then you've got choose a type, so it's authentication. And then that's, you see how it refers to brand? You'd use that later, so you'd using brand. So if you were to do who is, and then query 44.co.uk, then you would have using brand, and then the brand is, as you can see there, who is for that particular query, because that's the only one that's there to do that with, because it's the who is query. So that is what you would refer to later on in order to call your integration. So then we have the fetches instance and fetches indicators. Makes perfect sense. It either fetches instance or it fetches indicators. So if that's an EDL or something like that, you would have fetch indicators. External schema support, sync mirror in, sync mirror out, long running integration. All those are covered within the code explanations. And then of course you have your parameters, detailed instructions on how to do it, the commands that you're going to run. This is from the Hello World one. It seems to have loaded that one in the background. And then the Docker image that it's going to run in. Okay, and then you would save either save it, which is probably the best thing to do, or save your version. Sorry, I'll just go back to that. So if you save under there, that just saves the whole thing, which is probably the best thing to do at first. And then save version allows you then to use this one. So if you then change it and you change a setting and it stops working, or whatever, you want to revert to a previous version, I would always do version control until you're happy. Then you can drop back to a different version and load a different version from there. Okay, so that's basically how you then start building your own integration and your own code. So we talked about the forward slash and the exclamation mark. The next thing they're going to really want you to know about is what they call integration concepts. So that's to differentiate between parameters and arguments within the integration. So in this context, a parameter is a configurable value that is globally available. This means that every command can or will use those objects to run. And there are several types of parameters, the standard ones such as booleans, long or short text, API keys, and usernames, so on, which are all then available to all commands further down. Arguments, as the term would suggest, and if you're comfortable with coding, then you'd know what arguments are. Like parameters are user configurable, but in contrary to parameters, are single use only and available only to a single command. So you've got a command followed by an argument. I mean, that is, in my limited programming experience, that is pretty much standard. So we need to now look at defining integration types, because the exam will expect you to know the different integration types, and the best way to research is to have a look around the marketplace. So if we go to the marketplace, basically is where you can download stuff. So these are my installed content packs, and I've got it. So at the minute it's filtered by update available, and then you've got all packs. So these are all the ones that are installed. But if we go to marketplace and browse, we can start to then have a look at what's actually available. And there are some premium ones, which are obviously they're paid for, and then you get a subscription fee. So you can install a free trial for this one, and then obviously you can take up the subscription later. And I mean, these are just the range of things that you can do with XOR, and the range of third-party integration and sources of information is absolutely immense. The idea behind XOR isn't really to hold a little Palo Alto flag up and say the Palo Alto is the best and everybody else has got it wrong. It's literally, it's designed specifically to allow you to integrate stuff that you've already got, so third-party feeds and sensors and IPS, for instance, all that type of thing, existing firewall infrastructure, existing VPN infrastructure, existing SOC infrastructure that you have. Bring it all together in one place, as opposed to you having to then, in one big hit, sort of move everything over to Palo Alto. It's literally vendor agnostic on the back end of it. But also, it's really been designed with the fact that you, as far as security analysis and information is concerned, you can never have too much. Okay, you can't have too much information. What you do have, and what you can have, and what we're seeing increasingly within security operations centers, is too many alerts, too much noise. Everything is all coming together, and what is critical in one particular vendor may not be in another. You have some vendors that at the minute either by virtue of the vendor itself or by virtue of the fact that it hasn't been configured the right way, or there's gaps in the configuration that are giving out a lot of noise, and then you've got people looking at. So you do have information exhaustion. You do have like analysts struggling to know what to look at, and not only that, but obviously spending time looking at possibly the wrong thing. And so the idea is to put it all into one place and to filter out the stuff at the bottom, the noise, as best we can by using best practice and by using XOR engineers such as yourself when you pass this exam. Anyway, that's me banging on with myself. So basically, those are the premium ones. And then if we go here, we can see that we've got a Proofpoint, for instance, RiskSense. All these are downloadable. So if I install that there, I can install it. It's one integration that's in it. And then I could go and I could create an instance of that. And then it shows you the integration, email gateway, description, user Proofpoint, threat response, integration to orchestrate and automate incident response. And then you've got 13 commands. So this is then what you would use, and you could use this within automations and playbooks to ultimately take in this particular instance, you take in an email, something looks a bit dodgy, and this can then run that email for you through Proofpoint and come back with a verdict as to whether you needed to look at it or not. The dependencies for the particular content pack, version history, so you can see what was done and what was wrong. So version 1.1, clearly there's nothing wrong with that. And then what you can see, and you can revert to the versions that are in it, although I wouldn't in that particular instance. I certainly wouldn't anyway. And then once you go back to settings, servers, and then we can go to Proofpoint, add the instance, and there you can see all the sections that we could configure when we built our own instance, our own integration, sorry. Okay, so all these here now, going back to the marketplace, list of integration sort of includes, but isn't limited to, analytics and SIM, authentication, case management, data enrichment and threat intelligence, database, deception, email gateway, as we saw with Proofpoint, endpoint, forensic and malware, IT services, messaging, network security, threat intel, utilities, vulnerability management, you name it, there is something there. And if there isn't something there and you write your own integration and it works really well, you can submit that to the marketplace and under contributions, and you can contribute your content, and you can it's got all the automations that have been written by me, none of which are worth contributing to anybody, and then that will go through an approval process with XOR, and if it's found to be okay, they will then normalize. They don't alter the code other than to make sure that it runs perfectly every time, and make sure all the dependencies are met as well. And it's then on here, and if you decide to charge for it, then I imagine, I don't know anything about that side of it, but I imagine then there's some kind of financial remuneration. But the fact is, if it doesn't exist, you can create it. So going through from there, I mean, if in the case of you've created it but it isn't working, part of the exam is applying basic troubleshooting if the integration is not performing. So throughout the integration development process, it will break, and like all code, you'll need to debug the program. Any programmer that tells you they don't have to do this, I'd be really careful, because their nose will be growing. So you can run the code and look for logs in the war room, or you can use the PyCharm plugin, as we said before. and that adds a sidebar to the user interface in PyCharm that provides autocomplete functions and code suggestions and so on based on the Misto code. And that's going to be far the easiest way to debug your code. That's pretty much, from everything that I've seen of all the documentation of the exam, that's pretty much all that they're going to expect you to know about that. You can do a bit further research on it, but basically the top and bottom of it is, as you know, I mean, you can put a whole load of print statements in to see where it's failing or whatever. If you've ever debugged code in any way, shape or form, then you'll know what to do. So then we have the classification and mapping, and this is where really you start to then look at the strength of XOR, because this is where we go from. We start off with the integration, then we have an instance of the integration that ingests information, and then the first thing for it to go through, as we can see, if we go to, if I stop clicking that, it'll be very helpful. So we can see this is literally the logical flow of it. So we've got a classifier, we set the classifier, instant type if classifier doesn't exist. So if we don't want to classify this traffic and we just want to create an incident from it, which would be, in this case, I suppose phishing. So if we don't classify this ourselves, then it will drop the incident type. It needs the incident type there, and then it maps the. You can create your own mapper. You've got standard sort of mapping type thing. You've got the mapping that's already in here for phishing and stuff like that, and that's mapping the data that's ingested to fields within your incident. I'll do better than just talk through that, because that started to wander off into to the land of bullshit. So here we go. So classification and mapping. So we've got Palo log alerts, which is classifier. Okay, so to classify this, so this is where I drag my stuff in from syslog on my firewall, and so the only real thing here that you can take is going to be the content, which is a comma separated value, and it's gobbledygook until you split it up. Now, what I did find was that for all threat logs that come through it, threat being there, it was this, which is index 3, so 0, 1, 2, 3, that contained the type of threat that it was. So in this case, it's spyware. You can see I've got packet, which is reconnaissance, and vulnerability. Now you can draw from your instance, when you're doing this, you can fetch data through so that you can configure it based on that. However, one rather annoying thing, and I don't know if it's just me, but if your instance is set to do not pull incidents, do not fetch incidents, you can't pull from it. I suspect it's probably because you're kind of switching the instance off. So, using Splunk as well, which I also log to, what I was able to do was, even though all these are spyware, I put those under the malware, and then this is the incident type that's going to be created as a result of this classification. Put packet under reconnaissance, because I know that is that type of log when it's detecting like host sweeps and port sweeps and things like this. And then vulnerability for when it's picking up anything to do with CVEs or anybody trying any kind of like hacking into the system, or to use a vulnerability that it knows about. So you can do that simply by, if you know what that is, you can do that by adding the value in there. Okay, and now anything that was to come through that had test value there, which will be absolutely 0, that would then create a trapped incident. Okay, so if I come away from there, yes, I don't care because I've already done it. So it's in advanced, then instant types. So if we come down now to malware here, remember that's what it's going to be, and you can create new incident types, so you don't need to stick with the types that are in here. If you really want to, if you want to have multiple types of malware, for instance, incidents, you can, malware 1, 2, and 3, and have them handled in a different way, and then just pull that information from the classifier into your incident type, and then it will classify it as that kind of incident type. And then in here, you've got the layout. We'll talk about that in a minute. The default playbook it's going to run the playbook automatically. So specifically with things like manual investigations, I don't know if there's any real advantage in running the playbook automatically. You can run it automatically, but it will just stop at the manual tasks. In my particular instance, because I'm running the community version and only have 166 commands in a day, I don't run any playbooks automatically because they can soon run away with you. And before you know it, you've enriched stuff that you didn't even know about, and you've ended up with all manner of issues. Auto-extract the instant indicators. The default is in line, so it's done at the same time. None is no. Inline, as I say, is the default, or you can select inline. And then out of band is afterwards. What you've got to remember is if you do it out of band, then when the incident is created, it won't have all the information at that time. Post-processing is what you do afterwards. Generate investigation summary report is a specifically good one, so you'd put that in there, and then as you close that investigation, automatically it would generate an investigation summary report. I can't demonstrate that here because the reporting function for the community version isn't available. And then as part of that instant type, based on what you've decided it's going to be, you've then got an SLA, and you can select different SLAs for different instant types, obviously, and then set the reminder, and a reminder for when you want a reminder, which is perfectly straightforward. So just popping back here to classification and mapping. So we had the classifier for that, but now what we want to do is we want to map it as well. So we want to see what kind of information we want to pull from here, which is the raw data, or well, it's the JSON data. And this is specifically because this is a syslog. So instant type, the instant type that we are going to put that against. So if I want to say, okay, malware, so I now have, there's the details. I can say that I want to, so destination, no, go for destination IP, sorry, my bad. Okay, so I can get content, apply a transformer to it. I'm going to split it, it's comma delimited, remember, so I'm going to split it at the comma. And then I'm going to get index 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm going to get index 9 and hope that's right. Yep. And then you see, then I can split that, get index 9 from that, and then I can test it against my sample, and it'll show me what the result will be. Done testing. Okay. So from now on, when you get a malware incident that is created from that incident, basically, when it says okay, an incident, you will pull that particular end result, and that will be mapped to the destination IP field of your layout. Okay. So then we go back to advanced. to layouts, and then this is where you would then create a layout. And I'm not going to labour too much over this, because really one of the interesting things about this is it tends not to concentrate on this, because this is really designed to be as simple and straightforward as possible. You have the indicator summary, so this is for an indicator layout. The indicator summary and the quick view. Those relate directly to the indicator summary when you get an indicator, or the quick view. And that is exactly so. If we get an incident, and that's exactly the same here. You can see you've got the same across the top, and then as you've got when you get the incident itself, and you can change what's in there. Not on this particular one because it's locked, but it's drag and drop. So then the new edit form is there when you're creating a new Code 42 security alert. When you're closing it, and you can edit what you want in there, what needs to go in there, what needs to be mandatory, what's not. The incident quick view, you've got the timeline information, for instance, and the basic information. I really need to change my colors. And how it appears on mobile. So you can configure all that from top to bottom, inside out, build it from scratch, or you can edit an already existing one. Although you have to remember, if you're going to edit an already existing one, then you need to copy it and sort of edit it over. You can't edit the actual thing itself. You need to copy one that's there and then edit the copy. Okay, so then if we go back to incident types, and then malware, edit, and then that's where you get to select your layout based on your incident that's been ingested. Really, for domain 3, that is pretty much it. It's going to want you to understand how you. It's going to want you to understand how you, in summary then, I guess, it's going to want you to understand how you classify something, how you map it. It also wants to know why you would do that. So you would have to go into very much, you're going to have to understand that certain information, and I'm sure if you work in the SOC or if you're considering being an XR engineer, then you probably already know this, but you're going to have to understand that there are different types of security events. And for each of those security events, there is a very different, sometimes, type of pertinent information. So for a malware incident, you probably don't want to be looking at email addresses and things like this, because it's going to have very little to do with it. And so the idea behind creating your own layouts, creating your own incidents, and then putting them together in the way that your customer wants or you want, so that when you're building it for yourself, is that literally you have only the information that is required, because that's the most efficient way to get from incident to resolution. Other than that, everything else that you have to read that has nothing to do with it is just time taking up, just not responding to the incident. So you need to understand that. I'm just going to check through and make sure that I've covered everything. So then you know about you've got to describe the process of contributing integrations to the marketplace. As I said, they are, you create them, and then you can either upload them through GitHub. So you can put them on a GitHub repository so that people can just pull them down and use them, or you can send them straight to XOR for approval. And then they're uploaded to the marketplace, shared, and installed as any other contact pack would be. You can add, an interesting thing, so make sure I don't forget this within this particular one, because this also wants you to sort of be able to describe the integrations and the difference between an integration and an instance of an integration. So if we just go to that, so let's say you're a managed security service provider or managed service security provider, whatever you want to call it. So you've got multi-tenants. You wouldn't need multiple integrations. If they are both using McAfee, for instance, then you can have an instance for customer A, an instance for customer B, and never the twain shall meet. So you would configure those instances across separate tenants. Just making sure I've got everything that you need for domain 3. I think that's actually it at the minute. Domain 4 is all starts to get a little bit more on the technical side around the solution architecture, how you build it up, relationship between servers, live backup, dev, prod, and other available sort of stuff that's around it, like engines and so on, and how that all works now, how the architecture of the platform works together. We'll talk a little bit about the XOR using Docker and so on and so forth. So really the next section is all about the platform itself, how it's put together, how you then maintain it, how you troubleshoot it, and how you make sure it's all backed up. So I hope that's been good. I hope that's been informative. And if there are any comments about it, if there's anything you want me to go back over, or indeed if you find something that I'm wrong about, please let me know and I'll alter it, or I'll try and answer your questions. Because the whole goal isn't just to get views and likes and so on. The whole goal is to actually provide courses to people to forward their careers and to be able to move into what is a very, very good industry to be in. So like and subscribe, that would be absolutely awesome. And I will catch you for Domain 4.